The envelope was thin. Everyone else's was thick. I noticed that before I even sat down. The lawyer laid them on the table one by one. My uncle picked his up immediately. My aunt held hers like it was already money. My two cousins didn't even try to hide their smiles. Mine was different. No weight to it. I turned it over. My name was written on the front in my grandfather's handwriting. Shaky, like he wrote it near the end. The ink was slightly smeared on the letter G. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single index card. No dollar amount. No property deed. No account number. Just a phone number. 11 digits. A local area code. Written in the same shaky hand. Nothing else. My uncle glanced over. Saw the card. Looked away too fast. That's when I realized something was very wrong. My grandfather built everything himself. That's not a figure of speech. He came to this country with 2 suitcases and a trade. By the time I was born, he owned 3 commercial properties, a modest investment portfolio, and a house that had been paid off for 20 years. He wasn't flashy about it. He drove an old car. He fixed things himself when they broke. He kept his financial records in a green binder in the second drawer of his desk. I know that because I used to sit with him in that office when I was a kid. While my cousins played outside, I sat with him. He'd explain things. Interest rates. Lease agreements. How a deed works. Why you always read the fine print. He called me his little accountant. I was 9. My father died when I was 11. After that, Grandpa became something more than a grandfather to me. He called every Sunday. He came to my graduations. When I couldn't afford a deposit on my first apartment, he wired the money the same day I asked, and he never mentioned it again. So when he passed, I wasn't thinking about inheritance. I was thinking about him. The funeral was quiet. He had asked for that. No flowers, no speeches. Just a short service and a meal afterward. My uncle hosted the meal at his house. That should have been fine. It was his right. But something about it felt off. The mood was wrong. There was an energy in that house that didn't match grief. People kept stepping away to make phone calls. My aunt kept checking her phone at the table. I didn't say anything. A week later, the lawyer called everyone in. That was when I got the envelope with the index card. My uncle's envelope was thick. I didn't see inside it, but I saw his face when he read it. Controlled. Almost rehearsed. Like he already knew. My aunt leaned over. He tilted it slightly so she could read. She nodded once. Slow. Satisfied. My cousins opened theirs at the same time. One of them exhaled. The other one looked up at the ceiling like she was composing herself. They were not composing themselves because they were sad. The lawyer read the official summary aloud. My grandfather's estate, valued at approximately $2.3 million at time of death, had been distributed among surviving family members. Real estate to my uncle. Investment accounts split between the cousins. Personal assets to my aunt. And to me, the index card. The lawyer mentioned it briefly. Said it was a personal bequest. A phone number, included at my grandfather's specific request. No one asked what the number was. No one looked at me. I sat very still. On the drive home, I told myself there was an explanation. Maybe the number was a bank. Maybe it was a lawyer I didn't know. Maybe Grandpa had done something private for me, separately, and the family didn't know. I wanted to believe that. But I kept coming back to my uncle's face. That controlled look. That small nod from my aunt. The way no one asked about the number. They knew what it was. Or they knew what it wasn't. That night I looked at the index card for a long time. I didn't call the number. Not yet. Something told me to wait. To think. Over the next few weeks, I paid attention. My uncle started renovating his kitchen. Cash purchase, according to a cousin who mentioned it without thinking. My aunt bought a new car. One of my cousins took a trip overseas, posted pictures, seemed relaxed in a way she hadn't been in years. Nobody called to check on me. Nobody asked how I was doing with the loss. One Sunday, I called my aunt just to talk. She answered, spoke to me for 4 minutes, and said she had to go. Warm enough not to seem rude. Brief enough to say nothing. I called the number on a Tuesday evening. It rang twice. A woman answered. Elderly. Careful voice. She asked for my name. I gave it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "He told me you'd call." I didn't speak. She said, "He also told me it might take you a little while. He said you were careful. He said that was a good quality." My throat tightened. She said, "We need to meet. Not on the phone. Bring nothing. Tell no one." I asked her who she was. She said, "I'm the person who helped him change his will." I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. Something had happened to that will. And my grandfather had known it was going to happen. So I stopped reacting. And I started watching. Her name was Margaret. She was 71 years old. Retired paralegal. 40 years working for estate attorneys. She had sharp eyes and a quiet way of speaking that made you listen carefully because she never repeated herself. We met at a small cafe. Corner table. She arrived before me. She had a folder on the table, face down, and a cup of tea she hadn't touched. She didn't shake my hand. She just looked at me for a moment, then said, "You look like him." I sat down. She said, "Your grandfather contacted me 14 months before he died. He came alone. Paid in cash. Asked me to help him document something privately." She turned the folder over and slid it across the table. I opened it. The first document was a copy of my grandfather's original will, dated 7 years ago. I read through it carefully. The language was formal, precise. He had divided his estate into 4 equal parts. 1 for my uncle. 1 for my aunt. 1 to be split between the 2 cousins. And 1, a full quarter of everything, designated for me. With a note attached, for the one who always listened. I had to stop reading for a moment. I looked up at the ceiling. Breathed. Then I kept going. The second document was dated 19 months ago. It was a new will. Or something that looked like a new will. Same letterhead. Same lawyer's name at the bottom. But different distribution. Everything redirected. My portion dissolved into the others. My name appeared exactly once, in a clause near the end. A personal bequest, 1 handwritten index card containing a phone number, to be delivered by the executor. I turned the page. The third document was a signed statement from my grandfather. Written in his handwriting. Notarized by Margaret herself. I read it slowly. He had written it plainly. No anger. No accusations. Just facts. He wrote that over the course of 2 years, his son, my uncle, had been managing his financial affairs under a power of attorney arrangement signed during a period of illness. He wrote that he had later discovered, through a bank statement he requested directly, that funds had been moved in ways he had not authorized. He named amounts, dates, account numbers. He wrote that when he confronted his son told him he was confused. That the illness had affected his memory. That everything was fine and properly handled. He wrote, "I am not confused. I know exactly what I saw." He wrote that he had contacted his existing attorney to revise his will. That attorney had then told him the will had already been updated, recently, and asked if he remembered signing a revision. He did not remember signing a revision. He wrote that he believed a document had been signed in his name during a period when he was heavily medicated in a rehabilitation facility following a fall. He wrote that he did not have the resources to fight this legally on his own, and that he was afraid of what would happen to him if he tried. Then he wrote, "But I have a grandson who pays attention. And I have Margaret." Margaret watched me read. When I finished, I put the papers down carefully. She said, "There's more." She reached into her bag and placed a small USB drive on the table. She said, "He kept a camera in his office. Small one, mounted in the bookshelf. He installed it himself after the fall, because he was worried about things going missing. He never told anyone." She slid the drive toward me. She said, "There are 3 recordings. I watched the recordings that night, alone, with the door locked. The first was from 18 months ago. My uncle is sitting across from my grandfather at the desk. The green binder is open between them. My uncle is pointing at pages, speaking quickly. My grandfather is nodding, but slowly. His eyes are not quite focused. He had just returned from the rehabilitation facility 2 weeks before. He was still on multiple medications. At one point, my uncle places a document in front of him, points to a line at the bottom. My grandfather picks up a pen, pauses, looks at the paper. His mouth moves slightly, like he's reading. My uncle says something. I can't hear it clearly, but my grandfather nods again, and he signs. The second recording was from 6 months later. My grandfather is alone. He opens the green binder, turns to a section near the back, reads something, sits very still. He closes the binder. He picks up the phone and dials. Waits. Then, quietly, he says, "I need you to come. Something is wrong." He hangs up. He looks directly at the camera. Not like he forgot it was there. Like he remembered. He speaks. He says, "If anyone finds this, if you find this, then I wasn't able to fix it myself. Everything I know is in the binder. Don't let them keep it." He pauses. He says, "The number is Margaret's. She knows what to do." Then he closes his eyes. The third recording was from 2 weeks before he died. He is sitting at the desk again. Alone. He looks thinner. He is writing on an index card with a pen that clearly requires effort to hold. He writes slowly, carefully. He holds it up to the camera to show it. It's the number he left me. He looks at the lens one more time. He says, very quietly, "Be careful. Be smart. Don't rush." Then he sets the card down and folds his hands. I sat in the dark for a long time after the third recording ended. I didn't call anyone. I didn't type a single message. I didn't cry, though I wanted to. What I felt was something colder and more focused than grief. My grandfather had sat in that chair, alone, sick, and aware that something had been taken from him. And instead of shouting, instead of breaking down, he had done what he always did. He had planned. He had left me a trail. He had trusted me to follow it without making noise. And he had been right to trust me. Because I understood now exactly what had happened, exactly who had done it, and exactly how thoroughly they thought they had gotten away with it. Confronting them would have ruined everything. He didn't leave a message. My aunt called 20 minutes later. I didn't answer that one either. I put the phone face down on the table and made a cup of tea. Outside, the afternoon was ordinary. People walking. A dog on a leash. A delivery truck idling at the corner. Everything looked exactly the same as it had that morning. But nothing was the same. The filing was in. The evidence was protected. My grandfather's words were on record. The people who had sat around that table with their thick envelopes, who had nodded quietly to each other while I held an index card, who had never once called to ask how I was doing, they were no longer comfortable. They were no longer in control. And they didn't fully understand yet just how thoroughly my grandfather had prepared for this moment. How carefully he had laid every stone in the path. How much he had trusted that I would walk it without stumbling. They thought it was just another day. It wasn't. The deposition was scheduled for a Thursday. 9 in the morning. Patricia's office. Conference room. Small table, 6 chairs, a window that looked out onto the street below. My uncle arrived with his attorney, a man in a very good suit who carried himself like someone accustomed to winning. My aunt came too, though she wasn't required to. She sat in the waiting area. I saw her when I walked in. She looked at me the way you look at someone you're trying to read. I nodded once. She looked away. My uncle had not seen me since the will reading. When he walked into the conference room and found me already seated, something moved across his face. Not quite surprise. Something more careful than that. He composed it quickly, sat down, straightened his jacket. His attorney opened a leather folder. Patricia placed her documents on the table without rushing. A court reporter sat in the corner, fingers ready. My uncle looked calm, practiced. He had clearly been prepared for this. He knew what questions were coming, or thought he did. He had a story. I could see it in the way he held himself. Relaxed shoulders. Steady hands. He thought this was manageable. The first hour was procedural. Dates. Relationships. Timeline of my grandfather's illness and recovery. My uncle answered everything smoothly. He was careful with his language. He said, to the best of my recollection often. He said my grandfather had been fully informed of all financial decisions. He said the revised will had been my grandfather's own idea, that he had expressed a desire to simplify the estate distribution. His attorney occasionally placed a hand briefly on the table, a small signal to slow down or stop. It was a polished performance. Then Patricia opened a second folder. She placed the forensic document report on the table. She placed Margaret's notarized statement beside it. She placed printed stills from the 3 recordings in a row. Time-stamped. Clear. My uncle looked at them. His hands, which had been steady, became very still in a different way. Patricia said, I'd like to direct your attention to the recording dated 18 months ago. Specifically the moment of signing. She turned a printed still toward him. The image was clear. My grandfather. The pen. The document. My uncle's hand pointing to the signature line. My uncle looked at his attorney. His attorney looked at the photograph. A silence settled into the room that had a different texture than the silences before it. Patricia did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. She simply moved through the evidence the way someone walks through a familiar house. Unhurried. Certain of each room. She presented the original will. She presented the forensic examiner's findings about the revised signature. She presented the bank records Margaret had helped my grandfather compile, records showing 11 transactions over 14 months, totaling a significant sum, moved from my grandfather's accounts through the power of attorney arrangement into accounts my uncle controlled. She presented my grandfather's written statement. She read one line from it aloud. Just one. I am not confused. I know exactly what I saw. My uncle's attorney asked for a brief recess. They took 20 minutes. When they came back, the attorney's posture had changed. I won't detail everything that followed in that room. Some of it is still part of an ongoing legal record. But I will say this. My uncle did not leave that deposition in the same position he had entered it. The story he had prepared did not hold its shape under the weight of what Patricia placed in front of him. The evidence my grandfather had quietly, carefully assembled over the last year of his life, the recordings, the documents, the bank records, the notarized statement, Margaret's testimony, it did not leave room for the story my uncle needed to tell. By the end of the session, his attorney was asking about settlement discussions. Patricia said she would relay the inquiry to her client. She looked at me. I said, tell me the options. The process took 4 more months. There were negotiations. There were additional filings. There were moments of pressure and moments of waiting. My uncle's attorney argued for a partial settlement. Patricia advised me on what was reasonable and what was not. I listened carefully. I asked questions. I did not make decisions out of anger. The estate was ultimately reopened. A probate court reviewed the challenge. The forensic findings, the recordings, and Margaret's testimony were entered into the formal record. The revised will was set aside. My grandfather's original will, the one he had written 7 years ago, dividing everything equally, with a note that said for the one who always listened, was reinstated as the controlling document. My uncle was required to return the funds that had been moved under the power of attorney arrangement. Not all at once, and not without significant legal costs on his end. But returned. The kitchen renovation didn't matter anymore. The car didn't matter. The overseas trip didn't matter. What had been taken was being accounted for. There was no confrontation at the end. No moment where I stood across from my uncle and delivered a speech. No family meeting where everything came out dramatically. No shouting in a parking lot. No final phone call. He knew what had happened. I knew what had happened. The court records knew what had happened. That was enough. Margaret called me the day the probate ruling came through. She said, he would be pleased. I said, I think he would be relieved. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, he talked about you, you know. When he came to see me. He said you were the only one who ever actually sat with him. Who listened when he explained things. I didn't say anything. She said, he said he wasn't sure you'd figure it out. Not because he doubted you. But because he felt guilty leaving it for you to carry. I thought about that. I said, he didn't leave me a burden. He left me a path. She said, yes. He did. We said goodbye. I went back to his house once, after everything was settled. The family had mostly cleared it out by then. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. It smelled like an empty house, that particular absence of smell that fills a space after a life has left it. I went to his office. The desk was still there. They hadn't moved it yet. Too heavy, probably. The second drawer was empty. The green binder was gone. But I stood there for a while anyway. I thought about being 9 years old. Sitting in the chair across from him while he explained interest rates and lease agreements and why you always read the fine print. While my cousins played outside. While he called me his little accountant and smiled like that was the best thing he could think of to call someone. He had taught me everything I needed. Not to be angry. Not to be loud. To pay attention. To be patient. To let evidence do what shouting cannot. To trust that careful and quiet, done right, is more powerful than anything else. I stood at that desk for a long time. Then I turned off the light. Closed the door behind me. Walked to my car. Drove home. I didn't call anyone that evening. I didn't post anything. I didn't send messages. I made dinner. Simple food. I ate slowly. Outside, the neighborhood was ordinary. Distant traffic. Someone's dog. A light wind moving through the trees at the end of the street. I thought about my grandfather one more time. The way he looked into that camera. The way he said be careful, be smart, don't rush, not like a warning. Like a gift. Like the last lesson from a man who had spent a lifetime learning that the quietest move is usually the strongest one. I thought about the index card. 11 digits in shaky ink. The thinnest envelope on the table. The thing they had all dismissed because it looked like nothing. It wasn't nothing. It was everything. That night, everything was quiet.